Call to order this work session Tuesday, March 30th, 2021 at 10 a.m. Mr. Christensen, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this morning? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. Payson, you on? You can hear me? Everything's good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to regular agenda item 2A, information discussion regarding strategic direction to enhance the resiliency of the existing broadband network and to extend broadband network countywide. Homero, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Supervisor Christensen and Klein. It is a great morning. Springtime, and we're getting a lot more vaccinations, and hopefully we're moving in the right direction. So we wanted to talk about broadband with the board this morning. The purpose is to get input. We're at a point where we think we have enough information that we're trying to get input to plan the next steps. And so we're going to be presenting a number of slides. There's actually a big stack of slides that we're going to present, and hopefully we can keep you informed, and we can be giving you information. And at the very end, we're going to talk about implementation recommendations that we have, and we'll move along so as to to have time to get your input. Okay. I'll be following a script to move as fast as I can, but to say exactly what I want to say, okay? Because some of these points, there is a lot to learn and a lot to know in broadband, and I want to be very clear in what I offer you. So let me start with that the work of the strategic planning team was to envision how to change the paradigm where rural America, places like Gila County, lag urban America in having a viable broadband infrastructure. The late Tommy Martin, Supervisor District 1, was instrumental in the vision and in creating a strategic planning team. Her vision encouraged this planning effort. Other team members include Supervisor Steve Christensen, who joined us at the latter part of our meeting, James Mandlove, our county manager, who attended numerous and multiple meetings, Tom Holman, who will be a speaker today, our GIS manager, was involved in all aspects of this work, and we'll be presenting some of the slides. Amy Staten, who helped prepare the initial grant with ACA, which funded the consultants working on this project, and she contributed also to the survey that was undertaken and the website that was created. She will also be presenting some slides. Kelly Riggs, our IT director, joined us for a number of meetings. Mac Fieser, I call him a community liaison in Payson, but he's really a community leader in Payson, has been involved with broadband, first with the Broadband Consortium tech team, and now with our strategic planning team. Trevor Fleetum, Economic Development and Planning with the town of Payson, has been at every meeting that we've had and has been a participant with us. We also have Freddie Rios, City Councilman from City of Globe, Glenn Lineberry, Principal of Miami Schools, Roy Plasencia with the Miami Library, have also participated, especially in our latter meetings, with good discussion. Our consultants include Entry Point, and it is led by Jeff Christensen, the president of that company, and Jeff will also be speaking in this presentation. Kimberly Horn is led by Lena Barrett. She's in the back here. Lena Barrett's a professional engineer and project manager, and she also has working with her Pete Chasey from as a subcontractor with BPG as the network designer. Both Jeff and Lena will be helping with this presentation. One more, please. Okay, the slide that I'm looking at right now is about goals and vision. and it shows where we started. These were the goals when we started: reliable, to have a broadband infrastructure that is reliable, affordable, countywide, competitive, where people could opt in or opt out, smart and future-proof. Those were the goals. The goals have not changed. The vision was initially focused on a broadband improvement district, somewhat modeled after the Ammon, Idaho model. The slide offers the main elements of the improvement district, and you can read them, but I'm not going to read them. The last 15 months, we investigated various strategic alternatives and broadband network designs, and that targeted the goals. We've always targeted the goals, but that have helped revise the vision. And that is what we're going to share today, that revision that we have. Next. And the revision that we have and the recommendations that we have. One of the quotes is on the bottom of that slide was that that communication is not a sector of the economy. The communication is the economy. And Jeff Christensen, in the slides that he's going to present, will drive, I think, that point home. Okay? Okay. So it has been an iterative process. We have learned along the way about the challenges and the complexities of a rural county like Gila County. You can't really take the Ammon model and say we're going to implement that. You probably couldn't take any model and say we're going to implement it for Gila County. Gila County is pretty unique. So the strategic vision has evolved, and it started with the last mile. At the beginning, the focus was on a broadband improvement district or something similar to that, like a co-op, and that would fund the complete fiber network from the first mile to the last mile. The closest internet point of presence is 100 miles away in Phoenix, and as a result, the cost of a single standalone improvement district is prohibitive and would require extensive grant support. So we started with that. We found out the cost is high. The announcement by APS that they would bring 432 pair from Phoenix to Payson in the near future changed the strategic planning direction. Okay. And yesterday I talked to APS. They offered to provide us a budgetary estimate of cost. We don't have that yet. And they also shared with us that they're looking at middle of next year, May of 2022, to bring that fiber to the Payson area. Okay. The planning incorporated leasing of fiber from either APS in Payson or SRP in Globe. But even when we replaced the first mile infrastructure cost with a leased fiber, the total cost is still high. So we looked at we went from the last mile, then we looked at the first mile. And we looked at the first mile because APS offered us a leasing option. And even with the leasing option, we still have some high cost for something like a broadband district, something like a co-op. So the efforts to find grant opportunities for the middle mile generated the idea of connecting government buildings in the Payson Star Valley area and in the Miami Globe area to a government ring, and then extending the ring to the outlying communities via community centers, such as the fire station. Not only is this grant compatible, but it allows the outlying communities to create a broadband improvement district and share the cost of the first and middle mile with others. Or alternatively, it could make the broadband connection at those communities to interested internet service providers, both the wired internet service providers and the wireless internet service providers, allowing them to offer their service to those communities. And so those were the three iteration processes that we went through, and you're going to hear about the costs for them and the designs for those, okay, as we go through the slides. Next slide, please. So we're going to go over some points, and I wanted to share with you some of the high-level key points now. We're going to come back to these through the presentation at various times and also at the end. The internet exchange point is 100 plus miles away. And so for a single community, the broadband improvement district to reach back to the internet exchange point is costly. The lesson learned here is that APS, SRP, and the internet service providers have to be part of the solution. Okay. The next point is that the network infrastructure is costly. The permitting in public lands is time consuming, and we do have to cross a lot of public land, and the environmental clearances, of course, cost money. Burying fiber is 5 times or more expensive as aerial fiber. And the point is that the grants and partnerships are necessary. Okay. The next point is that if you look at Ammon, and I'm just looking at Ammon as an example, I'm not here to say we need to follow the Ammon model, but if you look at Ammon, they started a municipal network in 2008 and is still adding subscribers. This is the beginning of a multi-year effort. We're not going to be done with broadband next year. This is a long-haul, multi-year effort, and we need to be prepared for that. We may not be able to implement the entire vision next year, but we need to get started. We need to get started now, okay? That's the point of that point. And the last one is that community interest and support need to guide us in the direction that we go. It's very important, both at the resident level, the business level, the anchor institutions, and the municipalities. Their input, their support are essential, okay? So those are the key points, and you're going to hear about them several times as we go through. At this point in time, we wanted to do like a broadband overview. Next slide, please. And I'd like to see if I can turn it over to Jeff Christensen, who is joining us by phone. So Jeff, if you're on the line, we've got your first slide up and ready to go.
Great. Hopefully you can hear me. I apologize that I would like to be there in person. I apologize that I'm not. So the message, my part of the message is really to underscore what Homero's already said and to emphasize that broadband is going to become more important and not less important as we go forward. We're going to see really significant changes in the economy. Fundamental things in the economy in the next 10 years. And so this first slide is really meant to highlight the question. As you go through it, we bring up water, sewer, electricity, and then lastly, broadband. And the obvious question here is whether broadband has risen to the level of importance of these other things that we accept as utilities. And when you think about a utility, they have certain attributes. One is that it's essential infrastructure, and it becomes accepted as essential because the standard of living that applies to a particular community would really be hampered or negatively impacted if that utility did not exist. And so the question here is whether broadband has risen to that level of importance. And, historically, we've really treated broadband as something that's a nice to have. It's almost been treated as a luxury item. And there is not clear, especially from a policy point of view, there's not clarity yet that we're ready to treat broadband as a utility. But I think if you ask yourselves what the communities in Gila County would look like without connectivity, I think we could probably all agree that it is essential infrastructure. And really the debate would be around what kinds of speeds do we need and what kinds of reliability do we need if we can agree that this is essential infrastructure. So as you think about it as Board of Supervisors, you don't have to decide all of the policies that may be relevant or important for Gila County today, but I think it is important to put your policy glasses on as we go forward and think about the kinds of policies that the county may need to adopt to make sure that the residents of Gila County have this infrastructure from an economic point of view, from a public safety point of view, from other important life aspects that I'll cover here in a couple of slides. Next slide emphasizes the importance of fiber. This is something that we've discussed with the board in the past. Tommy Martin was a great champion for fiber optics and the importance of fiber optics. And I think her seeing that was really stimulus for this kind of discussion that the county's having now. If you look at this slide, this is not hyperbole. This is really the difference between fiber optics and everything else that's available. And as you can see there, what we're saying is that fiber, and we're not talking about the electronics that you attach to fiber, just the ability of fiber optics to send a signal or to conduct a signal. Saying that it can do 25 million megabits per second is actually lower than what they have demonstrated in a test lab. In a test lab, they've demonstrated 170 million megabits per second across a 1,000-kilometer distance. So what this is really saying is that fiber optics is going to take us very far into the future. And I'm not afraid at all to say this is 50-year infrastructure. So if we can agree, and there really is no debate about this, but if we can agree that fiber has really unique attributes, and from a reliability and a speed and capacity point of view, I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable that every community is going to get fiber optics. The question is when and who will own and control that fiber. And those are important questions about it. The next slide really gets at a trend that we're not just seeing perhaps in Gila County, but this is a national trend. It's probably even a global trend where young people are flocking to cities, and they're doing it for quality of life reasons. Broadband is an important driver of this, and the pandemic's created really kind of some interesting changes to the attraction of really big cities, where for a variety of reasons, people are starting to think that maybe they want to be in a place like Gila County that's close to a large metro area, but has some of the really desirable attributes of a less urban setting. So I think as you think about it, Gila County has a lot of really desirable things from hiking, camping, natural settings, lakes, mountains, deserts. Broadband, I think, can become a real driver of quality of life for the residents of Gila County, which means people could choose to work remotely, people could have access to amenities that are very desirable, that are digital, and still live in a less expensive area and an area that has really desirable natural qualities, which you all know is part of Gila County. So a concern I think you need to pay attention to is that if Gila County is not connected with high-quality broadband, what would the impact be in terms of losing your young people? And I think, when you think about the fact that gaming is bigger than Hollywood in terms of just entertainment, dollars spent on entertainment, it's obvious that young people expect to be connected and expect to be connected to high-capacity, high-reliability networks. Next slide gets at something I alluded to a minute ago, which are the different kinds of things that rely on high-capacity, high-reliability networks. Aging in place, I think, is an important consideration for people that have raised their families in Gila County and want to stay in Gila County. Telemedicine is not just about being connected to your doctor over a video chat session. It's about, can I leave the hospital sooner because I can have an IV pump in my house? Or can I have some other device that can be connected and monitored at a hospital? The hospital at home trend is part of that and a real trend in healthcare. I think emergency communications and public safety are really important categories that will require increasingly better communications. So the point on this slide is the current state of networks is not going to be adequate for innovations that occur over the next 10 years in these different categories. We're going to need networks that are more reliable and faster, greater speed. So I'm going to say we're going to need fiber optics for these things that are evolving and are going to have a significant impact on the economy. When you think about artificial intelligence, you think about blockchain technologies, you think about autonomous and connected vehicles, all of those things have this communication element to them. And that's why, we make the argument over and over again as we work with cities and counties that fiber optics are essential. All right, and then lastly, you've seen this slide, I believe. This is really talking about rethinking the way we organize our networks. Earlier, I talked about utilities. One attribute of utilities is that the infrastructure itself is a natural monopoly. And what we mean by that is we don't need to build two sewer systems. It doesn't make sense to build two sewer systems, two water systems, two road systems within a specific area. We also would argue that if you have fiber optics, it doesn't make sense to build two networks because fiber optics will give a community everything they need in terms of capacity. And so we are arguing that we should rethink this idea of giving the cable company one network in their own private lane, giving the telephone company their own private lane. We think that those should be, if you go to that next slide, it should be one robust digital roadway, and that roadway should be open to anybody that follows the rules. And we know that fiber optics can give us the capacity to implement this kind of utility infrastructure for communications. So those are my comments, and really just want to underscore, as Hamaro said, this isn't going to happen overnight. This is going to be a multi-year project, but the prize is to get fiber optics into the county everywhere possible. And you'll see really a flourishing of value if that becomes the prize that the county goes after. Thanks, Homer.
I thank you very much, and if you'll hold just a second, let's see if the other supervisors have any questions. Supervisor Christensen, do you have any questions at this point?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't. Thank you for the presentation. Are we related?
Oh, I'm sure we are somewhere. We'll
somewhere along the line. Down. Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only question I would have is when we look back and we see how far we've come in the last 10, 12 years, what's going to take the place of fiber in another 10, 12 years? Is there anything out there that's being considered?
There's nothing today that, there's new stuff coming. Elon Musk is putting satellites up into the air. Satellites are a great solution for a cabin that's 20 miles from anything. It's not a great solution for an urban area. The pricing on that is really double what you could get in any of your cities in the county. People would pay double for a satellite system, and their speeds would really top out at about 100 megabits. Where with fiber, having a default of 1,000 megabits up and down is kind of the standard we shoot for. And then if you want to upgrade to either 10 gigabits, which would be 10,000, or if you want to upgrade to 100,000 gigabits, you don't have to do anything with the fiber. You just upgrade the electronics on both ends of the fiber. And so it's got these, really miraculous properties that I really do believe it's, I would say it's a 100-year infrastructure, but that may be overstating what may happen over the next 100 years, but I'm very comfortable saying this is 50-year infrastructure.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to add a couple of thoughts to that. One of them is that 5G, for instance, will require fiber. And whereas the wireless technologies, the low orbit satellite, the legacy satellite, and microwave can offer solutions in rural areas that where there's just a few homes. But sooner or later, we need to keep up with all the other technologies that are coming that require something like fiber. The way I think about fiber, it is 12,500,000 times as fast as the closest technology. I mean, you saw the dots and the large circle. Another way to think about it is it's 12 million times faster than anything else. And the world is capitalizing on that. And whereas the low orbit satellite might get you to 100 megabit and microwave can get you to 100 megabit, that is you can't even see it on a piece of paper compared to that circle with fiber. And we need it to the extent that we can put some fiber in the ground is I think essential for Gila County. Are we going to be able to reach out to every single residence? No, of course not. And that's where I think the low orbit satellites and microwave play a role.
Thanks, Homer.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Amy to make the presentation on the next couple of slides.
Okay. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. Okay, you can go to the next one. So we had, we performed a survey over a few months, and we're struggling a little bit on getting people to go and take the survey. So we put it out on social media. We created a page specifically for Connect Gila County, and then we put it in the newspapers and collaborated with the chambers, and they put it out to their businesses. So we had 523 respondents, which wasn't bad. We would like to get more, actually, but 22 were commercial and 501 were residential. And of those, the average monthly cost for residential is about $89, and then for commercial, it's $140. Obviously, we would like to get that commercial up a little bit to get a better average on that, but that's what we have at this point. According to our survey, the importance of speed and bandwidth is very important to 78% of those who responded. And then the choice of internet providers is very important to about 71% of respondents. The current speeds will make a little bit more sense on the next slide, but here the current speeds for residential for download is 54 megabits per second, and about almost 6 for residential for upload. And then for download for commercial is about 60 megabits per second and almost 6 for upload. One of the things that we realized as we were going through was, if you look at this chart over here, the little fan, that's the rate of the current ISP, which we expected to get a little bit higher numbers in the fair and the poor. But what we found out was that most of our respondents were 40 years old and older. And so we're going to work a little harder for our next part to get respondents who are younger, because they're the ones that are understanding the speeds, and they're the ones that are going to work into the future. So we're going to work on that and we want quite a bit more response for those from teens to about age 35. Because they're the ones entering the workforce and the ones that are in the workforce and will be for the next 20 plus years. On the second page, the advertised speeds, obviously, if you look on this, it's a little bit hard to read, but the advertised speeds with their prices don't really match, because if you looked on our first page, people are happy to get the 54 megabits per second, but I believe that's because they don't really, that's better than what they've ever had up till now. And as technology increases for our area, as the need, as health technology increases, as need for schooling increases, people are going to realize the need for faster access. So the level of access that we have right now compared to our urban counterparts is very costly, and the technology that's used right now is going to be obsolete in the near future. So if you go to the next slide, we have our Entry Point created a website, and we've done some collaborating on this. It's very user friendly. It's kind of attractive too. But if you go there, it explains to people who might be interested what is fiber, why should we be interested, why would we look at it as a long-term plan for Gila County. And then it allows you to learn more. There's a lot of questions that are regularly asked questions that are answered on the website. And then there's an ability to go in and put your address in, and then it shows you up on a little map to show you who all is interested in fiber. I encourage you to go there. It's connectgilacounty.com. Has a lot of information that would be difficult to cover during this meeting, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take it on my small part.
Supervisor Christensen, any questions?
No, thank you. I don't. Thanks.
Supervisor Klein.
Thanks, Amy.
All right,
Good job.
thank you. So the next presenter is Tom Holman.
Okay.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So as part of this study, we've been looking at the existing infrastructure of what's in Gila County in terms of fiber capacity. As looked at before, and to expound on your question earlier, Supervisor Klein, they have not found an upper level limit to the capacity of fiber. It's just a matter of the electronics that drive the signal. So it being a 50-year technology is easily satisfied by the future. And for Homer's point, where 5G is requires fiber, all the cellular carriers that are advertising the 5G, you're aggregating on these cell towers with their various antennas. So you have to have a higher capacity line than those antennas can feed in. Just like you wouldn't put a 4-inch water line on your 3/4-inch house water pipe. 5G is the same way. You need a very high capacity infrastructure to support that cellular advancement. And then as things move on, it becomes even more critical. So our existing fiber internet providers, we've got Sparklight, which is the incumbent carrier here in Globe. Suddenlink is offered in Payson. Sparklight is coming to Payson. CenturyLink, who's been rebranded to Lumen. If you have DSL service at your home, they would be their internet provider. And going back to Jeff Christensen's slide, every one of those providers string their own cable on the pole. So we start looking, we've got 3 to 4 lines potentially coming to every home if you chose to change providers, that sort of thing. Sparklight received a $19 million contract for the E-rate for the schools and libraries. So that is part of their infrastructure expansion into the Payson area, is to satisfy the need of that contract. And that's a federally limited contract, so what they install, there's very strict limitations to what they can do there. And then APS and SRP for the existing fiber, they're the big utilities that are offering inter-county transport because they have their own business needs for managing power usage, and that's going to become more prevalent in a number of years as they look to have a more granular access to what each home is offering for power consumption. So they've seen this and are bringing in the long haul capacity of fiber. Next slide. So we developed a number of maps. This particular slide shows our understanding of the CenturyLink Lumen fiber path going from Payson to Camp Verde. It seems like the majority of articles where an internet outage occurs, where CenturyLink had a fiber, runs along that 260 corridor somewhere around Camp Verde. So, somebody with a backhoe found the cable. Next slide. Sparklight, as they're building in, they're bringing their network in from Sholo and farther back. So this is their large-scale construction plans. You'll note I didn't put anything into the Globe Miami area for Sparklight. They are the incumbent internet service provider. So that would just look like a big blue blob at that point. Next slide. The E-rate, these are the identified locations that would be beneficiaries of the E-rate construction. Pretty self-sufficient in that regard, but Sparklight will end up needing to touch every one of those dots to satisfy the needs of their contract. Next slide, Dave. So now we start looking back at how do we get capacity into Gila County. As we talked about earlier, APS is building a new line coming out of the Phoenix area. It connects in North Scottsdale and then goes up to Preacher Canyon on Highway 260, a bit east of Payson. From there, they back into Payson, and then the other loop that comes down south is their existing infrastructure that goes from Payson down to the new switch plant that's just north of Jake's Corner. Next slide. SRP similarly has their needs. They're the operator of Roosevelt Dam. They have a large substation to serve the mines, their power needs just south of the Public Works building. So they have a fiber ring to handle their business needs, and they do provide leased capacity on their excess strands. You'll notice that APS and SRP don't touch because their clientele is different. They each have their own service areas, and the area from Tonto Basin down to Roosevelt, there are no clients, so there are no power poles, so there's no infrastructure to connect them. We're talking a lot about diversity, and these providers that we've spoken about right up to this point really don't touch programmatically. So, Mr. Christensen, you had told me that you had worked with your father in, say, the T-shirt printing business. And if there was a competition or there was a competing organization inside the town of Payson, would you normally share resources? Say their silk screening rig broke, would you loan them yours or have some sort of agreement to share capacity? Right now, as each thing operates in a as a monopoly, there's no need for them to connect. So, next slide, Dave. So I think at this point, do I hand back off to you?
Thank you. Tom, I just wanted to say a couple of points on Amy's presentation. Number one, she really did a lot of work to get 500 surveys submitted. And I ask any of you, how many of you have time to fill out a survey? So you know that there's interest out there in Gila County. If we could get 500 people to fill out a survey, and we're doing this electronically, reaching out to them. You know that there's interest. The other one is it's going to be a real challenge for her to get folks under the age of 40 because, for example, the median age in Pine Strawberry is about 65. The median age in that area of the county. It's a little bit lower in the county total, but not much lower. So she's going to have to really double her efforts to reach out to that younger group. And I'm glad that Tom made the point of there is many infrastructures, as you saw. It's amazing how many infrastructures we have of each individual internet service provider and SRP and APS. SRP has a loop system, and that's one of the reasons why you don't hear about many outages in Globe, Miami area, because some of the internet service providers use that loop that SRP has. But there is no such loop like that in Payson, and nobody's touching each other's infrastructure. There's no connection. It's disjointed, and that is the paradigm that we need to change and that we need to address. Now I'd like to turn it over to Lena Barrett, as she is with Kimberly Horn, and she will be presenting the design update.
Good morning, Lena. Thank you.
Thank you
for being here
Thank you to the
today.
board, and thank you, Homer, for having us today. So we were hired by Gila County to develop a strategic plan, and as part of that was, looking at prioritization, looking at operating models, and a big part of that was design. So we worked with a subconsultant, BPG, who helped us develop this high-level design. And really, what we wanted to look at was essentially how to get to some costs that we could present to you all and to the communities, just very high-level costs, so that we can kind of show what this would take to build out in Gila County. So what you see over here on the screen is kind of the overview of the network. On the left, you'll see the first mile, what we call the first mile, which is the core ring, which is essentially how we're getting back to Phoenix to connect to internet service providers, or ISPs. So that's the first mile. And then the middle mile is that middle local ring there. And what we decided was to connect to fire stations, as Homer mentioned, across the county. And that would be our local ring, just to get out to the different communities. And from there, we have what we call the last mile, which goes out to basically from a hub to different nodes within each of the specific areas or communities. And from each node, we would connect to pedestals that connects to either a home or to a business. So that's kind of the big overview of the network. And the way I like to look at it is your first mile is your freeway, your middle mile is like your arterial roadways, from the middle mile fire stations to your nodes is like your collector distributor streets, and then from the node to the pedestal to the home is like your local streets. So maybe a nice way to kind of think about that. Next slide. So for the first mile, Tom and Homer both kind of talked about what's existing out there and what we wanted to accomplish. So the first thing was needing to get a connection to the internet service providers in Phoenix. So we looked at what existing infrastructure was out there, because that's a long way, right? It's going to be very costly for Gila County to try to build out all the way to Phoenix. So we coordinated with APS and SRP to try to see what infrastructure they currently have out there. And we did see, SRP has the blue line at the bottom is what SRP can provide, basically connecting Globe to Phoenix. And then we needed another connection from the Payson area to Phoenix as well to kind of create that loop. And so we discussed with both of those vendors, and APS is still building out their network, so it's not quite there yet. And their costs were, they couldn't provide us exact costs, but we wanted to get some ballpark numbers for what it would cost to lease fibers from both of these entities. And so as part of our design, we assumed leasing 2 strands of fiber, 2 SRP fiber strands, 2 APS fiber strands. And they would each connect down in the Evoke Center in Phoenix. And so actually, SRP connects to the Evoke Data Center in Phoenix. APS connects to an Ocotillo power plant. So we would have to build a connection from the Evoke Data Center to the Ocotillo power plant to create that continuous loop. So that really is the first part of the first mile, to get a connection to the internet service providers. The second part of what we wanted to look at is creating a diverse backbone, right? We talk about redundancy or diversity, because if any one of those lines get hit, you basically lose all connection back to Phoenix, right? So we wanted to create a full loop. And so you'll see that gap in the middle between the purple and the blue is where there was no existing infrastructure. There's no APS, no SRP, nothing else available there. So we did look at what it would take to build out fiber backbone in that little green portion you see on the map to create that continuous loop, so that if there was ever a break in, globe, you can route the other way, get back to Phoenix, vice versa, through that continuous green path. Oh, next slide. So the first line you see here, when we did a cost breakdown, the first line is that green line that we talked about. So that's the biggest cost that you'll see, which is building out the portion in the middle to create the diversity. And that would be Gila County putting out a 2-inch conduit with 288 fibers. We looked at in only underground, and we looked at a mixture of underground and aerial. So what we put up on the screen here is the mixture of underground aerial costs to build that green line you saw on the map in the slide before. And then you'll see some lease costs here. So this is what it would take to lease 2 strands of fiber monthly from each of the providers. Like I mentioned, APS did not provide numbers yet, as it's new to them. This model is new to them, but we assumed it would be similar to what SRP would provide, which is about $6,700 monthly cost to lease 2 fibers from each of those entities. And then we would have the data center monthly cost as well, which is $1,300. What we built into the construction cost was there's additional Evoke data center setup costs that need to be built out originally. But the bottom numbers are just what would be monthly costs for the first mile. Any questions so far on the first mile?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I was speaking with some representatives from APS about a month ago, and they showed me some maps, and we're speaking of continuing their fiber north of Preacher Canyon all the way to Joseph City, which will connect to another existing line that goes over to Flagstaff and back down, creating a giant loop.
Yep.
Okay. But what you're describing is the cost of us creating a loop.
So the purple and the blue is not us building anything. That's just us leasing fibers from APS and SRP.
The green line, though.
The green line is what, yes, Gila County would need to build to connect or to create that loop. Yeah.
I guess so. My question is then, why would we want to invest in that if APS is going to run a loop eventually?
I think there was a couple reasons why we wanted to look at that. One was there's some communities within that portion that if we didn't build that out, they would have a harder time getting a connection. So that was advantageous to have that there. For example, Tonto and Roosevelt need that service. I think the other part is, what we're discussing with APS, none of this is currently out there. They're building some of it. And so there's definitely many different options that we looked at. We looked at talking to Sparklight too, because they're building out some lines out there. We also talked to Zayo because they're building out some infrastructure in the south. So those are definitely some good options. We just kind of looked at shortest path to get the loop built out.
Okay.
Yeah.
That helps. Thank you, Lena.
Yeah, I have a question. Supervisor Klein, do you have a question? Go ahead.
You start, I'll finish. Go ahead. I'll think
Okay.
about mine a minute.
Okay. Yeah, the 6,700, 6,800, somewhere in there lease, is that a yearly lease? That's a yearly lease?
That was for, I believe, a 20-year lease, right?
Okay, for 20-year lease.
20-year, but monthly cost. Yep.
Okay, so that's a monthly cost. Monthly
Yes.
cost for 20 years.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I think those numbers represent approximately $15,000 per month. Would that be fair to say?
The bottom numbers.
Yeah, the two, all that added together is
Yeah.
just shy of $15,000
Yeah.
per month. Okay.
And that's just to get us connected. So if we want Payson connected to Phoenix and Globe area connected to Phoenix, that's just what we would pay in lease cost. So we're not including that. So the construction cost on top is what that green line would be. So that would be separate. Did you want to add something, Homer?
So what you're looking at is information about the first mile cost. And you're going to see components of this later on in the presentation where we say, we're going to use this one, we're going to use this one, we're going to use this one. In the numbers that we're going to show you at the end, the green line, we're not including the green line. Okay, we just wanted to understand what's the cost of that green line. And we first costed actually underground, and it was like $13 million. We said that's too high to even consider. And then we calculated $5 million, and we say there's other priorities above that green line, before that green line, but we wanted to know the cost of connecting the loop. The cost for the APS lease and the SRP lease, that's $6,791 per strand. And we would have to double that because we want 2 strands. We want direct communication in one direction and back the other way. We could use 1 strand, and you'd be limited to 10 gigabit, but we believe that you probably would need 2 strands. So if we were to just enter into an agreement with APS for, say, the Payson Star Valley area, we would have to lease two of those strands in the Payson area. If we wanted to see if we wanted to do something with the middle mile in the Globe area, we may lease 1 strand from SRP. If that's all we needed, we may lease both of them. But this is just showing the cost per strand. And it is a monthly cost, and we'd have to, with APS, you'd have to enter into a 20-year agreement. I think it's the same thing with SRP.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Klein, did you have a question? Or are you going to?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question would be first, the green line where we're going to connect it to, how come APS and SRP aren't willing to get together on this and do it themselves?
It's a good question. I think Sparklight might be trying to go down into that area. It's just a lot of these people look at density, right, where they're going to make a best return on their investment. So it's not something they're looking at right now, which is why it's a struggle for Gila County to fill that gap. We talked to Lumen to see, if we could even look at some spare conduit that they have. We could lease the conduit because that's a lot cheaper than building our own, right? Because that's getting in the ground is what costs money. So pulling fiber through existing conduit is a much reduced cost, and even they didn't have much to offer or weren't willing to get into those types of discussions. So we did look at many options like that because we know that it's going to be very costly. But like Homer said, we started with bigger picture. Underground is best from a design standpoint. When the cost was $11 million, like he said, and we started to peel back layers and see how we can save costs, who else we can talk to, that we can accomplish our goals with that first mile.
So Sparklight has the contract for the E-rate. So they're going to have, they're going to have services coming into Tonto Basin schools and libraries right there. What are they going to do for their fiber and everything? Because one of the things we've heard from the beginning of the E-rate conversations was that the schools and libraries were going to get these services all throughout the county, but that whoever was going to be the one with the contract would eventually have enough dark fiber in their line to go ahead and service the communities. Is that something they're not looking at now, or?
So and I don't know if Tommy wanted to touch more on that, but what we know is,
Let's let Jackie.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Klein, the thing about E-rate is that a provider who happens to be providing internet access for E-rate cannot ever give the impression that they're providing E-rate, that they're providing connectivity for other than schools and libraries at the expense of the E-rate program, because then they would be violating the E-rate rules. You see what I'm saying? E-rate says they will pay for fiber to schools and libraries. They don't say they will pay for fiber to communities. So an E-rate contractor who's providing fiber to schools and libraries can't give the impression that they're really building out to communities on the backs of the E-rate money. Does that make sense? And so Sparklight has not been terribly involved in this conversation because this conversation that Homero is directing is all about community access.
Exactly.
I will tell you that our current provider contractor that's doing E-rate Category 2 construction is as far as has started the run from Rye Creek to Jake's Corner with the end goal of Tonto Basin. And there's this wholly other different conversation that we should have, but I don't want to take Homero's time, about E-rate and grant cycles and construction timelines. And starting next week, our consultant will be filing for a request for an extension for the existing project because it has a hard deadline of June 30 unless it gets extended. We also, as a consortium, have a second E-rate project out there to, if they don't extend that one, then will they refund, will they fund a new one? If that happens, it turns out that, so the E-rate project has a hard deadline of June 30 this year. Not every place is going to be built out by then. This last year has slowed down construction considerably, and it took them a year to award. So we have a 470 in place to ask for a construction grant for the places that won't be finished by June 30. At the same time, that had to be filed before we could ask for the extension. So it's a government process, right? We have like 3 things going on at the same time. The bids that came in for those outlying areas that won't be finished by June 30 of this year, actually the price, the Zayo was the low bid on those farther places. So other things are coming, but they can't be combined in this conversation necessarily because we don't ever want to violate federal rules about what are we building. Does that help?
I totally get it. But, the fact is I would be willing to go out on a limb and say that whatever Sparklight's putting in the ground,
They're not. They're hanging it on APS wire.
there's going to be more than they need for the schools and libraries. And so I guess
They're probably not allowed to say that.
I get it. I understand that. But when I look at grant money and so forth, it's all tax dollars, so it's hard to work your way through that. But what I'm saying is when I look at this green line, knowing that half of that green line is gonna make it to Tonto Basin, that could reduce the cost to the county in the future by a lot of money. That's what I'm saying. The other thing that and Homer, maybe too, isn't Sparklight bringing a line off the rim through Christopher Creek and on down to
It's already up.
260?
It's
It's
already
already
lit up.
through there? And so isn't that line going to provide another route of redundancy? Or are they going to share their, what they call them, switches or routers or whatever? I mean, how is that all going to come together?
So, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Klein, I guess my last thing is talking about the E-rate in this meeting is trying to make an omelet out of, we're trying to make hard-boiled eggs. I realize it's not apples and oranges, it's apples and apples, but we're trying really hard to keep those conversations separate legally. So we probably should talk about E-rate after this.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I pulled back off of my questions when Homero said that we're not, when we get to the end of this, we're not going to consider the green thing, because I was jumping into the green line pretty heavy with questions as well. And so when Homero said that when we get to the end, we're not going to consider the green line, then it's kind of a lot of my questions I pulled back because I thought, okay, let me keep writing notes and you guys are answering them as I go. So let's see where we go. Supervisor Klein, did they answer where you at to now, or you want some more questions?
So, I guess I'm lost here on the green line. It's on our paper and we're looking at,
But it's not going to matter when we get to page 40, I guess.
We started, we wanted to just see what it would, like, biggest scenario, what it would take to build
Okay,
this out, right? 'Cause we
okay.
don't have that concrete information, like you talked about, the spark light, the E-rate.
right. And I guess, and I'm okay with that. I guess what I really want to say, this is a workshop. We're here to discuss broadband. And so I'm ready to discuss broadband.
Definitely.
And when it comes to taxpayers' money, I want all options on the table. I want to be looking at every aspect of this we can see, because it's a huge amount
Definitely.
of money. And so I get what you're saying about Sparklight. I get what we're saying about E-rate. I get what we're saying about contracting redundancy and working with other companies. But the bottom line is our constituents and their money.
Of course. And it's
so-
a very valid concern.
Thank you.
Supervisor. No, we definitely thought about that a lot. We had multiple conversations with Sparklight. There's only so much they can share with us, right? So we did the best we can to piece this high-level design together at this point in time. And like Homer said, as we went through the process, the strategic planning process, we went through a prioritization, right? So that green line, we looked at it too. We said, that's a lot of money, and we know that's not the first priority, right? And there's probably other ways to get redundancy that doesn't involve a huge chunk of money to build that green line.
Sure.
So you'll see it when he gets to that kind of section later of how we're prioritizing with the next steps. That's not on our top list.
Yeah.
And so we started with all of it, and we've then pieced things back.
Sure, and I get it. But in my simple way of thinking, when we look at, $4.3 million, we don't even need it on the paper. It's immaterial at this point. I mean, what are we discussing numbers for? There's still a lot of unknowns out there.
I think the good thing with having the number is you can see that what kind of obstacle it would take to build it, right? So, and what secondary methods you need to turn to get that redundancy, because this may be unrealistic. So I think that's why we wanted to start with that, so you have that backup, right? If someone's saying, well, why is Gila County not just building out this redundancy for us? You can see, here's the number to back it up. It's a large sum, and we're going to look at other options of how to get that redundancy. Hopefully that answers your question, Supervisor.
Well,
Sort of.
yes, and then it brings a lot more, so thank you.
Okay, yeah, if you'd like to continue
Okay.
with you.
If you could continue to then, yeah, all right. So then moving on to the middle mile. This is now assuming we have connection to the ISPs in Phoenix, or connection to internet service providers in Phoenix. And so what we looked at is where throughout Gila County we would build out that middle mile, the local ring. And so we looked at fire stations and government buildings. The first thing we looked at is identifying 3 major hub locations in government buildings. You'll see the 3 locations at the bottom. And those are all connected to each other in our design, so that if one were to fail, there's a connection to a secondary one, so that the network stays up. So those are the 3 major hub locations, what we call CRAN on that first diagram. And from there, there's different fiber distribution hubs connected to each of the major hub locations, and those are in fire stations throughout the Gila County. So that essentially is what the middle mile design looked at. For this design, we looked at a 96 count fiber instead of the 288, just because from our experience with other past designs, that's what makes more sense for the middle mile and for build out, because we're looking not just now what you need, but also 10, 15 years out, what kind of strands of fiber would you need out then. So this map just kind of shows the diversity of where all the fire stations are across the county. Again, why we chose to go with the fire station design method is because they're spread out, serving the different areas of the community. Next slide. Some more costs. So these costs here are looking at underground and aerial combination. We looked at 70% aerial costs to 30% underground costs. And we split it out for each of the communities, so you could see what it would take to build out the fiber network to connect to these fire stations. And you'll see some of them, so Roosevelt, Tano are much more cost effective, and that's because just the proximity to where they are along the loop. So they are closer to the first mile loop, so they have a shorter distance to run fiber to get to the first mile that connects back to Phoenix. So that's why those costs are much lower than the rest. The way we built this out was there would need to be some sequential, you'd have to build out Payson, because Payson is first connected to the loop, and then from there you can go up to northern Payson, eastern Payson, and to Pine Strawberry. So that's how we build these costs out.
Can I ask a question? When I look at your map on 28, I don't notice you've got the little circles with X's, and those are fire stations. But I didn't notice any on the reservation. And I know they have them, and I also know that the San Carlos also had some grant monies that they have a lot of fiber in the ground already. And I'm not sure where all that goes, and I'm just wondering as we go forward, is that going to be considered? Because if some of that's already done, that could save a lot of cost, and just a question.
Yeah.
We went out to the 6 cities and towns and invited them to join us. And at the beginning, we had one group of folks from different cities and towns participating. And at the end, we had a different set of folks from other cities and towns participating. In fact, I think all the cities and towns were on the call at least once during the process. I did invite both tribes, and there was no attendance from the tribes. But that's not that we're going to exclude them. We're going to include them. They're just not, when we think about the fire stations, we're talking about the fire stations because they represent outlying communities in Gila County, and how to reach those outlying communities that today are dependent on DSL or coaxial as their only means of getting broadband. And this is a concept. We're presenting a concept. It is a work session. We're not finished. We haven't published a document yet. And yes, I think the feedback that we're taking is to see what we can do with the tribes on their fire stations and or their communities. When you see the word fire station up here, it means like a community center. And the reason that we like the fire stations because it's like a first responder. We think there's grant money for that. And also wherever there's a fire station, that also means there's a sizable community there. It's just not five or six homes. There's more than 5 or 6 homes surrounding that fire station. Okay. And those are some of the things that you see up here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions on the middle mile? No?
I'm good. Supervisor Christian or Klein, you guys are good? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So then the last mile was more theoretically looked at because it's a little difficult to understand how many businesses would or homes would sign up or want this service. So what we did look at is designing for a node to a pedestal. And we just assumed a half-mile radius from the fire station. And from our past experience with designing these networks, one node typically serves about 200 homes or businesses. And then a pedestal can serve up to 6 homes or businesses. So we did kind of an overview design of what a theoretical scenario would be for a half-mile radius from a fire station and how that would cost from the node to the pedestal. And then we looked at 4 different communities. We looked at Young, Pine, Strawberry, Roosevelt, and Tonto Basin for those different scenarios. What's difficult to cost out now is from the pedestal to the home. Again, depending where the business is, where the home is, the fiber rung could be significantly different for each of those. So there's not one scenario that we could put together, and as well as we don't know what the internet service provider will be, and what kind of equipment they will require, such as type of router, modem. So at this point, from the pedestal to the home was not included as part of the cost, but we're able to put a number from a node to the pedestal. And like I said, the node is connected to the fire station, so it's kind of that, the freeway arterial collector logo. If you go to the next slide, we just kind of looked at, here's an example of Pine Strawberry. We looked at population and how we would, if we were designing this, how we would spread out those different nodes to kind of cover the density of the population throughout those areas, and those are the half-mile circles, radius circles I talked about. Next slide. So on the left there, you'll see the last mile cost breakdown. Again, that's what it would cost for just one node for each of these communities. So Pine Strawberry could have 4 nodes, so you would have to multiply that and see what it would cost based on population. We did look at subscriber costs too. We looked at population and what it would cost per subscriber if this was the cost of the node to the pedestal. And then lastly on the right, back one, just the table on the right, we did want to do the exercise to see, if Gila County didn't lease those 2 strands of fiber, or didn't build out that first mile, or build out the fiber runs to the fire stations, what it would cost each of these individual communities to do this themselves. You can see some, very high cost there for these communities to do the middle mile themselves and do the first mile and get connected back. And then we looked at, again, population compared to that cost and what it would cost per person in that diagram for each of those 4 communities. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Supervisor Klein, go ahead.
Thank you, Tim. So, I want to use my hometown for an example. So, MTE out of Idaho has already run fiber all over town. They've already put the main line in from 260 down the Chamberlain Trail. How can that be factored in, or will it be factored in? I mean, will there be a company, let's just say Sparklight, would they be working with MTE since the infrastructure is already there? I mean, I just can't get past seeing us duplicating an infrastructure that's already in place.
Right. So part of this, this section I just talked about was design, right? Part of the whole strategic plan was we looked at operating models. So one of those is public-private partnerships that we're definitely considering, especially for the first, the middle, because like you said, there's infrastructure we may not know about that's there or that's coming, and we don't want to duplicate effort, of course. So that's another piece of this, the whole strategic plan is looking at those operating models that Homer is going to talk about here next. But definitely something we would consider when we actually move to, this was high-level design just to get a big picture, but definitely we would look at that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll turn it back over to.
Next slide. Okay, so let's make an assumption. Let's make an assumption that we're not able to capitalize on E-rate, and that's not necessarily a good assumption. That's actually a bad assumption. If the law prohibits us from doing that, then we need to lobby to get that law changed, because that would help all of America. If it's buried in the ground or it's hung up on a pole, the communities ought to be able to enjoy that. But for today, I'm using the assumption that we're not, okay? And I just wanted to put some cost to give you like an order of magnitude kind of cost. And the next assumption that I'm going to make is that the cost that Kimberly Horn and the team have prepared are accurate. Now, I can't guarantee that they're accurate. We're still reviewing them. We wanted to get to this work session to get your input. And the next go around, we won't have 40 slides. We'll have 10 slides. It'll take 20 minutes, and the font will be 30 font or larger, okay? Because we're going to boil this down to where, because if we're not coherent in our explanation today, we still have a little bit of work to do, but we can't afford to be like that with the public later on, okay? We need to be able to do a slam dunk. We all know we need broadband, okay? We all know we need it. It's how do we get it, okay? And so we're going to look at some numbers here today, and I know James is already looking at me because I've got some charts up here that are dollar based, and we're gonna look and examine if the costs that we just heard Lena share with us are accurate. how does it affect these 4 communities that are representative of all the others? And I'm using these 4 communities. It doesn't mean we're going to do work on these 4 communities. That's yet to be determined. Earlier, I talked about community interest. If the folks in Pine Strawberry are not interested and they're not willing to pay anything for fiber, why would we go there? Okay? If the folks in Young aren't interested, why would we go there? On the other hand, if they are, then let's find a way to see if we can make it happen for those communities. And I don't know if it would be all the fire stations that we would reach out to. Again, it's community interest that has to guide this, okay? Because in the end, I think they're going to have some some of their own money invested in this. So let's look at Pine Strawberry as an example, okay? And let's put it in terms of the subscriber. So let's assume that a broadband improvement district or co-op is created and it is prepared to pay all the infrastructure costs by getting a 20-year loan at 4% interest. The amount to be financed is shown at the top box, and it's $15.8 million for Pine Strawberry. And again, I'm asking you to just assume that number is correct. We're gonna double check that it is, okay? $15.8 million, and that you would have to pay, each subscriber would have to pay $22 a month for maintenance and $10 a month for a subscriber, okay? For subscribing, $10 a month for subscribing to the internet service. The $22 have been provided by Entry Point based on what they've learned at Ammon, Idaho, and the $10 is representative of what the internet service providers are charging in Ammon, Idaho. Sometimes it's 0, sometimes it's 15, okay? I'm using 10. On the table at the bottom of the slide, the first row shows the number of subscribers, homes and businesses subscribing for the business, okay? The green highlighted area shows the cost to the subscriber. And of course, it diminishes as the number of subscribers increases. It goes anywhere from, if there's only 200 folks that are subscribing to the service, and they have to fund the $15.8 million, they're paying $587 a month. The bulk of it is going to pay for the loan, and they're going to do that over 20 years. Now, if they want out of the broadband improvement district, what they wouldn't pay would be the maintenance cost on a per monthly basis and the internet service charge that you see up there. Otherwise, in the broadband improvement district, you pay the amount that's financed in your behalf until you've paid it off. Whether it's you or the next property owner, it's something that's assessed on the property, okay? And we're going to hear about that a little bit more in a minute. But you see that it diminishes to the point where if you have 2,000 subscribers in Pine Strawberry, they pay something like $87 a month total, okay? And that's pretty reasonable if you're getting 1 gigabit service, okay? That starts to be in the reasonable range, okay? And certainly if the number goes higher, you pay less. And that's the example that this shows. And the important two things stand out here. When you look at the first, middle, and the last mile, you see a high cost on the middle mile. And again, assuming that number is correct, that's a high number. But it's going to turn out that the middle mile is a large portion of the cost in the broadband infrastructure. The first mile is not, because it assumes that you're leasing either APS fiber, or if you're in the Globe, Miami area, that you're leasing SRP fiber. And it's at a reasonable cost. Okay, we already have an estimate of cost from SRP. We expect APS cost to be very similar. Okay? We have every expectation that it'll be very similar. Okay, so the first mile is reasonable. The last mile is a low dollar component of the cost, and it's the middle mile that we need to address. So when I first looked at this, we started thinking about what if we were to get grant money to take fiber out to communities, like a fire district, communities of a significant size, and we had a hub in Miami Globe and a hub in Payson, and we did that with grant money. Then we would position the internet service providers to provide service to each of the communities, and it could be a wired internet service provider like Sparklight, or wireless like Phoenix Internet, providing microwave service. And so that's one of the ideas that's what triggered when we saw this huge cost, and the fact that in Pine Strawberry, assuming the costs are right, you would need at least 2,000 subscribers. And that's a lot of subscribers for Pine Strawberry. That's probably every homeowner and every business, okay? The population, I use the population at the very last number, 2930, that's the population for Pine Strawberry, by the way. Okay, and I just used that number just so that I could have so that I could compare the number of subscribers with the total population. Okay, so let's look at some of the three other areas, because these examples serve to illustrate what we're talking about. Okay, we're going to look at three areas, and we're going to start with the Roosevelt area at the top, where you see that the number of subscribers to make a standalone broadband improvement district or cooperative feasible is much lower. And it's much lower because they are a short distance from the SRP line, so that the middle mile cost is negligible compared to what it was for Pine Strawberry. And so it only takes 414 subscribers actually to make a broadband improvement district feasible, because it comes out at $61 a month when you have 414 subscribers. Of course, that assumes every person that living would be a subscriber, but we know that the households are less than that. So you would have to have all the businesses and all the households subscribing, and you would be able to get something in the order of $61 a month. Okay, so the next one is the Young area, and this is just the opposite, because their middle mile extends back to Payson. It assumes that. Hopefully it isn't like that. Okay, hopefully we can find either a way to do a private partnership with Sparklight, or we can engage somebody like a Phoenix Internet to do microwave in Young. We can find some alternate solutions. But again, if we were to pursue the broadband improvement district or the co-op model, this is assuming that, then in Young, even with 100% of the folks signing up, it remains unaffordable. Okay, so you need to do something with the middle mile. This points out that you need to do something with the middle mile, either partner with Sparklight or get a grant for it. And that's what, when we did these, I wanted to do them like this for that purpose, to kind of understand the impact of that middle mile. And so the same challenges are present in the Tonto area. Now, you saw earlier Tom's presentation showing Sparklight going near the Tonto area. Is that correct, Tom? Yes, it goes to the okay. So you have Sparklight reaching out into the Tonto area. That's a possibility to work to encourage that company to provide internet service. Why do we have to do anything? In a sense, why are we even involved in this sometimes? Okay? But it goes back to the do-nothing scenario is not an option. Because look at what happened to the rural areas for electricity. You think the power companies would go out. It took the Rural Electrification Act to bring energy to many rural areas, because they're interested in the dollar. Because we got a paradigm that says the more money we give the internet service providers through grants, the more we make their monopoly stronger. Unless at the same time you require that they provide service at a certain dollar rate per month. But we don't do that. As I'm talking about the federal government, okay? Federal government, and I don't know if the state government so much, but the federal government, they provide grants to internet service providers with no strings attached other than extend the broadband to this area. But it doesn't say how many residents they need to reach out to. And that's what's flawed, okay? And so you've got somebody like a Sparklight that brings fiber to Payson, and they're offering it to commercial. They want to offer it commercially, and you know, it would be interesting to find out how many people they have subscribed, because there is a cost associated with connecting to the Sparklight infrastructure, and people may not be willing to pay for that, so they're not going to get it. So we got broadband on the street, but nobody after the sidewalk is using that fiber. And that's the real shame. That's the real shame that we have in the rural areas. Okay, so I mentioned that if the same challenges are present in the Tonto area, because this assumes we're not using Sparklight fiber, that we're actually the broadband improvement district, or that group, that co-op, is bringing the fiber to the Tonto area. So these slides help show why the strategic planning team has focused on finding a way to make the middle mile as grant compatible as possible. That's what we're looking at. Let's give ourselves that other tool in the tool belt, okay? It doesn't mean we're going to go there, but let's look for a way that we can make the middle mile grant compatible, and so that we would be reaching out to either community centers or fire stations. Okay, any questions on these two slides that I've gone over?
Supervisor Klein.
Thank you, Chairman. So, so when it comes to like pine and strawberry, Homer, the main trunk line going to Payson goes right through the middle of Pine and down through there from Fossil Creek, comes out through there. So wouldn't that be that shouldn't be a very huge cost at all, wouldn't that be considered that the middle mile is already in place? I mean, it's there.
These calculations include putting in a new middle mile, not using that the broadband district or the co-op is funding the middle mile. Now they could enter into an agreement with CenturyLink, for instance, to use their middle mile. We find that to be unlikely. They would be inviting, CenturyLink would be saying, here, be my competitor.
Okay. I'm just curious because when you're saying that about pine and strawberry, I'm like, well, the whole thing comes through there anyway.
We started, and you ask yourself, why are you going through all this exercise? Because we actually presented to the board. And what we presented to the board is that we would look for a county-wide solution. You yourself went with me to Hayden and Winkleman, okay? And I remember those two visits well, where one of the towns, it didn't even know why we were there or how they would benefit from what we were talking about. But our mission, because that was the vision, was to reach out to find solutions for the entire county. And I have forced the process to do that. I'm partly responsible for you asking some of these questions, but it's the direction that we got from the board as well, in our earlier discussions. And some of these things get thrown out. They said, nope, not feasible, not feasible. Let's find the ones that are feasible, okay? And we're just collecting enough information to make those decisions.
Yeah, and one thing I want everybody to understand is I'm not just hammering this process. You guys have put a lot of time and effort into it. We spend a lot of money into it. I just, in my mind, just getting things straight, as simple as the line coming through Pine and Strawberry, as simple as other lines going into some of these remote places that we know is going to be there, but yet if we do it from scratch, it's going to cost millions of dollars. I mean, that's why I'm at. That's why I like work sessions, because we can ask these questions and we can talk about this. So.
And it's good to know that cost, because I think it gives you leverage at the bargaining table or at the partnership table.
Supervisor Chris, did you have any questions at this point before we move on?
No, Mr. Chairman, not at this point.
Okay. Romero, where it says moving forward, let's move forward.
Okay. So let's go on to the next couple of slides. The next one on operating structures. We have actually spent time looking at co-ops. We talked with the Gila County Development Authority. We've talked actually Sparklight and CenturyLink and APS and SRP. We talked to Sparklight numerous times. We've talked to CenturyLink a couple of times. We talked to them as a county, Tom and I, and we talked to them with Kimberly Horn on our side. And not a whole lot of traction has been gained from those conversations, okay? But I think when APS gives us a cost, I think we can have more serious discussions with them. And now that we have some numbers, we can have a more serious discussion with them. So public-private partnerships are a possibility, but it needs to be a partnership. It's not just the county handing money to anybody. We need to satisfy the need of the community. We need to make sure that the money is well spent. It needs to be a true partnership. And I can't tell you what shape they're going to take, because we don't know yet, except for one that I'm going to talk about later on. But we cannot overlook public-private partnerships. Okay, they need to be part of the tools in the tool belt for us to look at to see how we can bring broadband, real broadband to Gila County. The other one is the cooperative. That we wanted to look at that because that's also a possibility, and so we've gathered some information. But the one that we've looked at the most is the Broadband Improvement District. Next slide, please. And so from the Broadband Improvement District, it requires state legislation. And you'd have to ask yourself, there's many improvement districts, by the way, that are allowed for the county and the cities, okay, but there's not one that is well suited for broadband, that comes close to being that we could use for broadband. So we would need state legislation to do this. And basically, it will enable property owners within a designated area to join together to finance infrastructure improvements such as fiber networks. The Broadband Improvement District would issue a bond backed by property assessments to fund the project, essentially attaching the cost of the network to each participating property. Property owners can pay the assessment all at once or over a longer period of time, usually 20 years. Anyone who chooses not to connect to the network is not assessed. Broadband improvement districts must be authorized by state law and are created by the community petitioning the board. So if the state legislation were to put a broadband improvement district into the state statutes, you really can't initiate it. The board can't initiate it. It'd be a group of people in that community that would come to you and say, we've got at least 51% or 55% or some number as required by state statute that says that we want to form a broadband improvement district. We'd like to form one. And then the process would follow just the same process that is normally followed for a road improvement district or a sanitary district or a fire district, etc. It would be the same. It's actually community action, not board action. Okay, and I think working towards a broadband improvement with the state legislature would allow, not just in Gila County, but in any county, any group of folks to say, we've had it, we need broadband, we'd like to take this into our own hands. The other thing it does, and it's not an important one, but it kind of like sends a signal, I think, to the internet service providers that these citizens have a choice. They can work with you or they can work on their own. And I think that's also of great value from a broadband improvement district. Okay. So anyway, we've looked at those structures. We have a lot more documentation where we, as time goes on, with your guidance, if we do work with the CSA on this, then we're basically prepared. We have the information that we need to talk to state legislatures and or to CSA. Okay. Any questions on the structures?
Go ahead, Supervisor Klein.
My question is probably more for you two than it is Homer. How's that for a change? We work.
Oh, the attorney just perked up.
That's good. You know, we work with a lot of our counties rural. You know, we work with our rural towns and outlying areas and whatnot. One thing that I'm beginning to see is that in a lot of our areas, there's a big interest in folks moving in to these areas, whether it's Young, Tunnel Basin, Pine, Strawberry, whatever. But in the same token, I'm hearing more and more about, well, we don't want this, well, we don't want that. One thing that comes with broadband is, yes, you would have more things, you know, for yourself, you know, as far as computers and whatnot, but it would also enhance more people to be moving to these communities to work, more businesses looking at it to come in, and on and on. So I would just ask my two partners here, what do you guys think about your communities? What do you see in your communities, and what would be your guess on support for, say, a broadband improvement district where they're actually going to get taxed for this?
Supervisor Christian, you want to touch that lightly?
I guess, yeah. I guess my initial response is, well, Homer, did you say that if 55% or 60%, whatever number we come up with, let's say Chaparral Pines as a community, it's in your district, they think they can afford it, so they want to form a district. But did you say that anyone that did not opt into that, yet they're in the neighborhood, would not have to pay?
That would be our recommendation to any state legislation that gets created, which is not the same as a road improvement district. In a road improvement district, everybody uses the road. Everybody uses the road, everybody pays for the road. Everybody in this contiguous area is part of the district. Even though I may have voted against it, I get the benefit of the road, I pay for the road. Broadband improvement districts, what we would be proposing would be, if you don't use it, you don't pay for it. And that you as the 51% of the folks that are interested in doing this, it would have to be cost feasible for you. So you need, early on, you need some help with calculating what's it going to cost, what's it going to cost me. Now, that's why I'm signing up for this.
Okay. Let's say you want to think about it. So 5 years later, you say, okay, I want it now. And how do you pay into that system?
You pay for the connection cost up front.
Okay, but the district was formed and they divvied it up on a mathematical formula, split all that money evenly among the properties, and now someone that didn't do that just pays an entrance fee.
It would be a connection fee determined by that broadband improvement.
I see. Okay. Well, I'm all for broadband. I think it's great we're kind of out in front of it and we're thinking about this a lot. It just seems the biggest hurdle is the money and finding grant money. I would hate to see the public have to pay for all of this.
I would agree.
Yeah, that's all.
My 2 cents is, you constantly hear that the government's running somebody's life. So in the decisions that are made going forward, I think it's a great idea that the communities would have to come to the board to say, look, I want to be in on this. I think it's a great idea. And then if the average age of a community is 65 and doesn't want it, that's their privilege. And we're not going to say, you're going to get it, you're going to have to pay for it. So that's my 2 cents. And
I support broadband. I do. I think it's needed in our county. Better broadband is needed in our county. I just see things changing, and I see people changing, and we deal with it. We deal with motels in Pine, for example. We deal with people moving into these rural areas where now, because of the COVID, they can work from home. They have that ability. They buy the property, they move there, they work out of their house. But I don't want you paving roads, and I don't want any more people moving in. I see that too.
But can you do something about the dust on this dirt road?
Yeah, would you please pave my driveway? Yeah. So, so to have these discussions, I think is really good. And I think going forward to have these type of discussions in our town hall meetings will be even more important to know, so people do know. I mean, we have people watching us on YouTube today, and things get around. It's on our website, minutes and everything. But when we're talking about a project as important as this one, and all the facts that people need to understand, I think going forward it's something that we can hopefully take to our town hall meetings and our public and put it out there, because it will be up to them. And I can see the arguments coming. I can tell you that. So,
thank you for your input. Actually, it's very valuable. And if you were to ask me, well, what are the chances, Homer, do you think that if we could have legislation enacted that we would have a broadband improvement district in Gila County? I would say it's a low probability. It's not, everybody wants Sparklight to offer the service and to offer it at a reasonable rate, okay? Comparable to what you find in urban areas. But there will be neighborhoods that aren't getting the service, that the only way they can get the service is via something like this. And I think for them to have that available to them would be of value. is what it's the way I look at it. But we're interested in the way that you look at it, okay? And so thank you for that input. I think it was a very valid question, and I'm glad you asked the other supervisors to chime in. So we wanted to move on to grant, Chairman, if we could do that, grants.
Please
the
do.
Next slide. And you can see that we're covering a number of things, okay? They're all important. The creation of a broadband district would offer us an opportunity to structure a solution a particular way for a neighborhood and differently for another neighborhood. Grants are important for what we're doing. And you've heard a lot about broadband grants recently because during the COVID crisis, we had some broadband grants. But the point that I will make on the next two charts are two. One, there are grants that are available for broadband, and not everything that has broadband in the title can be used for first, middle, and last mile infrastructure construction, okay? And so let's look at this. This is the COVID grants that were available. And let's take a quick look at them. The one that's called Connecting Minority Communities is for minority education institutions, black colleges and minority colleges, to help them with broadband. Okay, it's not something that we could use. We couldn't go and apply for that grant to pay for the first mile or the middle mile. Telehealth, they're for eligible health providers, doctors, to help them make their offices compatible with broadband. If they need a computer, if they need a Wi-Fi, they need some device, what they call the NIT, to connect to fiber, for those type of things. Okay, low income. It provides $50 a month for internet services for low-income families. Okay, all those three, we could not use those grants for what we think about it, and that is constructing the middle mile, let's say. Unserved Americans. Now that one is different. It is for broadband infrastructure. It can be used by internet service providers working with local government, and it had $300 million available when it was issued. On some of these COVID grants, they actually haven't made a decision yet how they're going to distribute the money. So I was not able to find information that could help me when that grant would be opening up. The last one is a tribal broadband connectivity. It's for tribal infrastructure. And you can see that it's got a lot of money on it, $1 billion. Tribal infrastructure and also affordable broadband. What that means is it allows for telehealth and telemedicine and all of those kind of things that were important during COVID, okay? So those were the COVID grant opportunities, and what we saw is one of them that had some applicability to what we are trying to do, okay? So the next slide, please. The next group of grants are grants, USDA grants for rural broadband have been around for a number of years, okay? Actually, I remember seeing Community Connect grant when I first heard of Jeff Christensen talk about broadband for Gila County. And the first one is called the Community Connect grant. It's to help rural communities extend internet access to unserved areas. And the way they define unserved is 10 megabits per second or less, and where it is likely to be commercially unavailable. And it funds construction. And it requires you to connect to a critical community like a fire station. Okay, so the cycle closed on December 23rd of 2020, and it'll open up again. This is a grant that keeps coming up that's funded with USDA. Okay, so that first one is a grant that we should be looking at. The next one is distant learning telemedicine. It's to allow for the lease or purchase of equipment to be used for broadband by teachers and doctors. Okay, it's not for the broadband infrastructure. It's for inside the building. Okay, the next one is a loan. It's the broadband loan and loan guarantee. And the reason I have it up here is it's something that a cooperative could use. Okay, if a cooperative wanted to form. A cooperative actually for broadband could form without actually needing the approval of the Board of Supervisors. Okay, it's a company created to serve the people that own the company. Okay, so just wanted to share those grant opportunities, and also to tell you that the state, and I got a call from CSA this morning to give them pointers on one of our legislatures is interested in supporting the $10 million for broadband that the state wants to, that the governor is proposing that the legislator adopt. And so it's very likely that we're going to have money from the state budget for broadband in the form of grants, okay? Something in the order of $10 million. The next federal infrastructure bill will include monies for broadband. Back in December of last year, the House passed a bill. It didn't get past the Senate, but the House passed a bill that targeted $100 billion with a B for broadband. And one of the things that bill required is for the states to look at the digital divide between urban and rural, and then allowed, I think, $365 million to fix that disparity. Okay, so we're going to see money for broadband come from the next infrastructure bill or the next broadband bill. It's going to happen, in my opinion. Okay? So we'll continue to see grant monies available. Are we ready to capitalize on them? Do we want to capitalize on them? And that's why we're wanting to make sure we have a plan to move forward. Okay. Questions on the grants?
Supervisor Christensen, no.
No, sir.
Supervisor Klein.
So, where do we start to get ready for these, Homer? I'm kind of listening to you on this, and you know, the one opens and closes, and we're kind of behind the power curve. Am I right? I mean, we kind of need to start really focusing in on something, and with all this information you've given us, and get ready.
We need to have enough information that that we feel comfortable on the cost of the project that we're trying to undertake, with some degree of confidence that says we're going to chase $1 million, we're going to cost share 15% of that, and that's going to get us the project that we want. And that's where Kimley Horn is helping us. On some of these projects, we probably need to do more work. The costs that were developed by Kimley Horn were what I'm going to call conceptual. But if we had a particular project, and I'm going to talk about the Payson Carrier Motel in a minute. If the Payson Carrier Motel project was something that we wanted to do, we need to be able to put a design together and a dollar cost together. Some of these grants require, and you're exactly right, the grant that I talked about, I think it was the Community Connect grant, requires that you be shovel ready. So we still need to do some work on the design side. And then other grants allow you to apply for design money. And on some of these projects, I think for example, if forming a hub in Payson becomes a reality, how do we then reach out to the outlying communities, and how can we get grant money to do that?
So we really need to be looking at this from the standpoint of taking one bite at a time. And so I've heard that hub and Payson concept talked about several times. And it seems to me like that would be kind of the number one place.
Next slide, please. I think you're right. So what are the implementation strategies? Number one, the thing that I would say is, well, number one is a carrier hotel in Payson, in our opinion. And it goes something like this. If the first mile is not reliable, neither is the rest of the network. We can do all we want to, hooking up Pine, Strawberry, Christopher Creek, etc. But when there's an outage in the Payson area, everybody goes dead, okay? And so you need to fix the first mile. It needs to be reliable, redundant, resilient. And so in the case of the Payson areas, the internet service providers are not looped. Actually, Sparklight dead ends in Payson, okay? It comes up through Sholo, runs through Heber, Forest Lakes, and dead ends in Payson, in the Payson area, basically, with nowhere else to go, okay? CenturyLink dead ends in Payson as well, and runs up north, okay? But they dead end there with no place else to go. There is no loop for them. They can connect on their own, I mean, why does it take government to tell them they should be connected together? Well, that's just the way it is. That's their own business. If that's what they want to do, I guess that's what they can do, okay? And so we're not sure at this time if they will connect. So one recommendation is to sit down with APS, all the interested internet service providers, not just CenturyLink and Sparklight, but the ones that are providing microwave service, and the area towns, and explore the alternatives of putting in a carrier motel in Payson, something that allows any of them to connect if they want to with these two strands that we would be leasing from APS. And we share the cost, that the group shares that cost. How we share it, I'm not prepared to I don't know, okay? But that the cost should be shared, okay? And this would allow them all to connect and use the APS line in the event of an outage, okay? And the idea is that cost sharing will lower the cost for everyone. APS, up until today, has not given us a budgetary estimate of the cost, okay? We have assumed it's going to be similar to SRP. We think we're right, okay? But as soon as we get that cost, and APS yesterday promised that they would get us a budgetary estimate within days, okay? They had offered to have done it weeks ago, but yesterday they offered to get it to us very soon. And once we have that budgetary estimate, I think it's time to call a meeting with all the right parties and to start talking about that carrier motel in Payson. A part of what can be added to that thought is that we could form a government loop. We're going to have two strands coming from APS, and if Gila County could form a government loop, we could connect all our government buildings in Payson. And or if the towns were interested, they could do the same thing. It's just something that adds on to the carrier motel. But the principal and dominant idea is the carrier motel and the internet service providers having another route out of Payson. I think that is the dominant thing that we need to focus on. If you say like one bite at a time, then that's the bite we want to take. Okay. Now, can we do something for Globe Miami? Sure, we could form a government loop lease from APS, but I think that would have to be under the idea of that it's cost, that it saves us money on the cost for providing broadband to our facilities, and we're not there yet. That actually leasing a line from SRP would cost more than what we pay today for the broadband that we have to our facilities. Okay, so we still need to do work there to make that cost effective for us to consider. Okay, the number two thing that I think we need to do is we had always planned to meet with the communities, and we months ago were planning on having a virtual meeting with at least where we invite the folks from the Miami Globe area and the folks from the Payson Star Valley area and reach out, spread the county in two, and reach out to that area, the north and south, and tell them we're going to have a town hall and we're going to talk about broadband and share with them, not with 40 slides, but with 3, what we're talking about. And then get them to answer questions, very much like, I don't know if some of you were on the call with CAG on regional transit, but to put up a survey during the call that says, are you interested? How much would you be willing to pay? What speed would you like, etc. And get a feel for interest. Or would you be willing to be a community leader? Can you provide your phone number? And just reach out to the community. We've done that via the survey, 500 surveys from people, basically people that have broadband. But we haven't heard about the people that don't have broadband. Okay, and we'd like to have these two community meetings to get a better feel for what the community would like to have. Okay, the third item is we should be looking at that middle mile. We should be looking at the middle mile and how it would be grant compatible. Because I think there's going to be money for that. Reaching out to the fire stations Right now, the fire stations, they pay $100 and they get some form of broadband a month. $100 a month, they get some form of broadband. But it's not the 25 megabit per second. And it's probably not reliable. And I think that they are a first responder in Gila County. And I think they need to have a more secure, reliable broadband service than what they have today. And I think we could make a case on a grant that would be appealing to position that middle mile. And once you get fiber out to the fire station, then it opens up, I think, a number of opportunities for the community. They can form a broadband improvement district, and they're sharing the cost of that middle mile and the first mile. You could offer it to the internet service providers like Sparklight and Phoenix Internet, the wired and the wireless. I use Sparklight, I mean I should not be repeating Sparklight over and over again. I mean internet service providers, whoever they may be, okay, to offer service from that point forward. And so that would be the third item. And then the other things that we can work on is sponsor legislation for the Broadband Improvement District. Work on any opportunities that an internet service provider brings up. If there's an internet service provider that wants us to work with them on something, we should be willing to do that. And the last one is to support complementary projects across the region. One of the things that I heard, Glenn Lineberry from Miami Schools talked about the final mile project that he's working with the state on. And this is working to enable internet access to unserved students using whatever technologies the area dictates. And if you were to read the little pamphlet, it would tell you low orbit satellites, microwave, any way you can get it. Any way you can get broadband to those students is valid, okay? And he's working on that project. And actually that project blends in very well with the idea of the community center fire district concept, okay? And it would, it's something that the final mile project could benefit from. But I think we need to open up the doors to those type of activities that are taking place even across our community and across the state, and see where they take us. But those are some of the items that I thought we would offer as recommendations for your input. So with that was my last slide. Took a long time. The next time we will apply the 10, 20, 30 rule. 10 slides, 20 minutes, no 30 font.
No questions, right?
And many questions.
Well, good. Supervisor Christensen, comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Homero. I know you've put a tremendous amount of work into this. You're on it all the time. It's almost consuming your entire day, every day. So yes, I think the message from the board is we are interested in having broadband. We just don't know how to get there yet. And I got a technical question, I guess. Now, Lumen comes into Payson with fiber, and but there's no fiber going to people's houses, is there? How is that transmitted then? Is there a portion of this fiber network that is wireless or goes via antennas, or does fiber actually have to come into a home?
The definition for broadband is 25 megabit per second. And you can actually transmit at that speed if everything is perfect using old telephone wires. You can transmit at that speed using coaxial cable, as long as every neighbor, every person in the neighborhood isn't on the internet at the same time. And you can transmit at that speed very easily with microwave, point to point. And you can, of course, the satellite. So folks that have broadband service in the Payson area don't necessarily need to be linked to that arterial fiber that runs down the street.
But if they were, which is our goal, right? If they were, their speeds would be through the roof, or it'd be 1,000, whatever
Yes,
they, whatever.
that's correct.
Yeah.
If they were linked to fiber, then their whatever they needed to use, fiber would easily meet.
Okay.
Whatever speed they need, fiber could easily meet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one thing that I want to thank you all for presenting today is good, and thank you for bringing that wire, Tom. That's good too. But this broadband issue keeps going on, and it keeps consuming the time that I see that Home Arrow's spending on it and whatnot. I kind of wonder where we're headed with that. As far as, are we going to eventually be having to have somebody solely involved in broadband to put all this together and keep up with it? Because I see it getting more and more as we go along, between the grants, the working with the other entities, the towns, all that. So that's the only question that I kind of have, and maybe that's one more for you, James, the question. So, I mean, I'm sure this has to have crossed your mind somewhere along the way.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Klein, it has crossed my mind, and I call it who is going to be our broadband champion. Mr. Vela has done that and done it extremely well, even though this is not in his wheelhouse of what his comfort zone is, but he is an expert much more than all of us, I would say. So who is our Gila County broadband champion? And in looking at our current structure within Gila County, I have not been able to identify who that is. And so it may be as a part of a discussion of who is our champion, because as you're finding out, it takes somebody full-time to continue to push this and to explore all of the different veins and arteries that are important to getting this out to the individual home, to get broadband to the population, the people of Gila County. So Homero's done a fantastic job. You've all have seen that. We need to find him some relief and assistance for that.
So yeah, I will say this. Anytime that I have an issue, I go to Home Arrow. It doesn't matter what it's on. If it's a building, if it's fleet, if it's roads, if it's whatever, surveys. And so I can't imagine how Home Arrow's juggling his time to stay up with this. You know what I'm saying? And now, we have the capital projects going on, the capital improvements, our buildings. So I'm just throwing that out there. So thank you, Home Arrow, and thank you everybody else that's been a part of this.
I will just tell you, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Klein, that Homero's days are typically 12, 14, 16-hour days. Yep. And he works 7 days a week. So his commitment to Gila County has been incredible and continues to be. And I had worked with Mr. Vela previously, and when I came here, shortly after I got here, reached out to Mr. Vela I need some help. And Mr. Vela is the one I reached out to.
County Manager, Chairman, Board, I thank you for those thoughts and those words. And, we do work hard, but I've had a team that works hard with me, and many of them are here, and some of them are listening in. And it does take a team. Broadband, not one person, I think, knows everything about broadband, and I think you need a number of people. I think going forward for the county, we do need to make sure that we have somebody that's going to be here long term. I mentioned, this is not a this year project, okay? I can see the animal shelter, the Payson complex, that's a 1 year project, okay? I think we're going to get both of those done this year. And those are 1 year projects, but broadband is a multi-year, we'll be talking about broadband for the next 5 years. And hopefully we'll be talking about that we implemented this one, now we want to implement this one. And it is something where I think you have to build up knowledge. I've been reading about broadband probably for the last 18 months, and I'm not yet comfortable with what I know. And I may run out of time to get comfortable. I think the county needs to start looking at who's going to be driving broadband the next 3 to 4 years. I'd say 3 to 5 years. I think we need to look at that. And we can have consultants, and we've got Entry Point, and we have Kimberly Horn. One of the things that I would never want to do is I would never want to engage the community and engage the internet service provider, APS or SRP, without having some county representative at the table that's going to be here tomorrow. Because it's those relationships that are going to shape how fast and how clever the solutions are. Okay? It's that relationship. It's always about that are going to help us find the right solutions. And again, it's important for the internet service providers and APS, SRP, and even the municipalities. It's important that we communicate with them. And this is a long-term effort, and we need to be thinking about the long-term way of how we're going to handle this. So thank you for all those words. I do work hard Monday through Friday. However, I like to relax on weekends, James.
Well deserved.
Yeah, Omero, I just want to say thank you very much. From what, like a year ago when we were visiting towns and things to try to get some organization and putting this grant funds that we've had, you've used those to the point that you have, and we really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm really happy that we ended up with the grant money to get it to our schools and libraries. I think that'll help us a long way with negotiations on taking it further. And the thing of it is I think this is a bigger animal than one person can deal with all the other loads that you carry as well. And economic development director, maybe years ago it had a different meaning. Today, economic development, if you don't have broadband, you don't have any economic development. So that's a position that we've had in the past and have done away with, and maybe we could work with economic development with slash broadband high on the list, because we are growing with Discover Gila County. We're bringing head counts to Gila County, and so broadband would just enhance that a bunch as far as opportunities for people working from home, for new businesses coming in. So, is that a position that would be beneficial if their deal is to help us economically with pushing broadband and working with all the entities to do that. And so I appreciate all the information today and all the input. And board members, do you have anything else that you would like to chime in on? Supervisor Christensen, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you once again, Homero. And I want to let everyone know that this is my second time through this. The first one took 20 minutes longer than this one did. And so I have given a lot. So it takes that long to explain it, and I'm still mildly confused about it. So,
Thank you. And that's because you didn't ask as many questions as were asked today, but it still took long.
Omero, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, there was a comment about taking a bite out of the elephant. What we have as a group, and Homer indicated that the broadband hotel or the internet hotel in Payson, we think is the first one. And so back in our conversation with Washington, D.C. and the different money that is flowing around, that is our focus. We are searching, and that is our priority, is to get that hotel in Payson as the first thing that we're going to do. And so we are specifically looking for the grants, the things that will be available, the earmarks that have been reintroduced and will be in place. that all these different pots of money that are available to us, we're going to reach out for the hotel, broadband hotel in Payson.
That would be great if we could get a grant that would help us with the position to just put them on that project. How sweet that would be if things like that would be available. But Supervisor Klein, go ahead.
On that note, James, we're looking at a 15% match, I think, for those grants, if I'm not mistaken, or at least for most of them. Financially, we would be all right to shoot for that.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I thank you all very, very much for the presentation and the information. And I'm going to take a 5-minute break before we go to regular agenda item 2B, if that's okay. We'll take a 5-minute break and see you guys back here in a little bit. Okay. And Payson, you're ready. We're gonna re-adjourn this meeting. And we are going to get into our regular agenda item 2B, information discussion regarding the necessary steps to plan, improve, maintain, and market the Gila County Fairgrounds as an economic driver for local businesses such as hotels, restaurants, stores, and local shops with Mr. James Minlove. And I'm just going to say up front that we are kind of limited on time for other meetings going on, so this is not going to get into it real deep. But the fairgrounds is one of my pet peeves. I worked there many years ago, and I'd like to see a lot done with it. And so we're going to touch this for about 20, 30 minutes and then probably go into another work session with it. And so I thought what we could do is open, you could kind of give a short presentation, and then each supervisor could kind of give a little information on kind of what they would expect answers for or questions they may have for our next work session.
Absolutely.
And so, good morning, James. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Absolutely. That's our intent here, is to introduce that we have a wonderful, beautiful facility, and that we can take more advantage of that facility and utilize it for the benefits of citizens of Gila County. Rather than take away from anything, Ms. Sanders is our resident expert. Other than what knowledge you have of the fairgrounds and the history is important to how the fairgrounds has evolved over the years, and it is important of what we can do going forward. Attached to this is the fairgrounds property deed. On the property deed, it has some limitations or deed restrictions that we call them, of what the property can be used for. In me, as being an accountant, not attorney, and closure years, I believe that the intent of the state of Arizona in selling us the property for $100 and something thousand, 180 acres, was that it be used for the public benefit and public purpose. We intend, for whatever we do that and comply with all of the deed parameters that have been established. But Mr. Chairman, with your authorization, I'd like to turn this over to Ms. Sanders.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair and board members. 126,000. I'm not at all the expert. I just have been riding herd on trying to make sure that we continue to have a fairgrounds that is enjoyed and used by our public at large. And so you can see by the deed, just a tiny history lesson. I believe we got this in Governor Bruce Babbitt in 1979. It was state land. Following that, we've had a group of very dedicated volunteers helping create what is out there today, largely initially due to horse racing. And so the Fair and Racing Commission, as they exist now, their roots were in horse racing, to have horse racing events out there. Horse racing as an industry in Arizona, it looks much different than it did in 1979. There are many, many fewer venues, and it has to do with people's interest, and if there are only a certain number of dollars out there in the economy that are available for people to gamble with, they have many other opportunities these days than in 1979. So horse racing, I have it somewhere in my folder, maybe 2005, might have been the last year. And it used to be 2 weekends, both days, with mule racing in addition. It winnowed down to maybe 1 day of racing a year. Just wasn't economical. The horses the investment in horse racing is such that if you are a if you're a, what's his name? You know, if you're trying to raise a Kentucky Derby champion, you're really not coming to Globe, Arizona to race anyway. And that lower end horse racing has kind of gone by the wayside unless you're right along southern Arizona. So there really isn't a horse racing opportunity. There are minimal horse racing opportunities today. And there is, in fact, this week or next, the Arizona State Racing Commission, they send me notices of their meetings, but horse racing isn't what it was when we started. The Fair and Racing Commission, as a group, we have in about 2013, we kind of looked at them again and reconstituted them into a group that were appointed by the board and had limits to their terms. That entire group has resigned, and we'll be bringing an agenda item before you first Tuesday in May to acknowledge those resignations and offer those folks an appreciation, right? Because that's a lot. Some of the people on that board probably have been involved since 1979, possibly before. So they're really, I believe there's a need to honor that effort. And then there's also a need to look at where do we go from here. Back in 2013, there was a consultant, and we did a study, and the big idea was to have a Fair and Racing Commission that was appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and that attached to that would be 4 or 5 private nonprofit corporations that performed specific or were in charge of specific events out there. And that's where we would be talking about the Fair Board. So there's some confusion when you say Fair and Racing Commission. That's not the same thing as the Gila County Fair Board. The Gila County Fair Board is a private nonprofit corporation. The Gila County Fair and Racing Commission is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. So those are 2 different entities. And then there was a big idea that there would be a fair board, a racing board, a rodeo board, and I think the other one was go-karts, were like 4 entities. That really never came to fruition. The racing board really was the Fair and Racing Commission. So we were trying to force an organization. We were trying to force constraints around an organization that didn't really work. Fair board works well. Rodeo committee has dissolved, and they don't exist anymore. So really, fair and go-karts are about the last 2 of those 4 that we were trying to put together in some kind of an organizational framework. So I just need us to understand that. Do you have questions about those organizations?
I don't. Supervisor
Okay.
Christians and our Klein?
Do you have a rodeo here in Globe?
So when the rodeo committee dissolved, retired, disbanded, the functions, some of those rodeo functions transitioned over to the fair board. And so in connection with the county fair, which is in the fall, there are often rough stock events, but there has not been a rodeo maybe in 3 years.
Okay.
There used to be a spring rodeo and a fall. There used to be a spring rodeo and a fall fair, and horse racing followed fair. But that's kind of
Yeah, that's one of the
people's interests have changed over
That's
time.
a big difference in Payson. We have a robust rodeo committee. You know, I mean, we're the rodeo people up there.
And historically, there was a lot of interest, but the existing Copper Dust Stampede Rodeo Committee, or whatever something along there was like their official name. They were not attracting new members, and the existing members' health needs. Some of them moved away. Some of them became ill, and it dissolved. Okay. So the rodeo functions that happen out there happen under the auspices of the fair.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And there also, to my knowledge, is a as far as of course, the last 12 months have been kind of odd for me to be able to tell you what happens out there because not much has happened out there during COVID. But there's also a pretty solid go-kart group that use the go-kart track out there. And I wanted to just introduce it. It's the idea of some of the things that I think are important for that facility. I think it's important that we keep a connection to the citizen input, either an advisory committee or a strategic committee of some kind to help keep it connected to what the community at large wants out there. I left out, but not part of this organization, but something that has been a long time anchor event out there is the Gem and Mineral Show that happens in January. And they have been a good partner with the county. Part of the fixtures that are out there, they purchased. So they own the glass display cases that the fair uses at fair time, and the fair owns some of the tables that Gem and Mineral use at Gem and Mineral time. And they need consideration as well because they've been having Gem and Mineral shows longer than we've had a fairgrounds, but they've been out there since we've had it.
Okay, is that kind of
It's kind of my background.
kind of your history?
A good place to
Kind
stop.
of good place to stop. Okay, I guess with the time we have left, and for, I guess, food for thought for our next meeting, is where would Supervisor Christensen and Klein like to see the Healy County Fairgrounds go, or what they would like to see done with that? And Supervisor Christensen, I know that probably you haven't been at Healy County Fairgrounds much, but we're kind of in a place that I think we need to do something with it. So if you have kind of a direction or questions that you would like answered before our next work session on this, please give them to us.
I need to probably get out there and take a look at it.
And Mr. Chair, Mr. Christensen, I could go on for another 30, right?
Oh,
But
I'm sure you
I
could.
think this might be a good place to just introduce
Right.
it. And there are many opportunities, and they run a gamut, right? There's probably 180 degrees. I mean, there's 180 options we could take out there. And I would like to bring 3 or 4 forward for you guys to consider at some point, but that may not be today. In the meantime, you're welcome to drive out, come by, and I think going out and looking at it would be a good thing.
Yeah. And so I don't really have anything to add to that.
That's fine. Supervisor Klein.
Well, I think I'm glad we're bringing this up and we're looking at it. It's high time we did this. It's sat there for quite a while. And so I'm really looking forward to when we can dive into the discussions and talk about it. My whole purpose will be that it's there for the community and events and all that. You know, we have people here that like the rodeos, like the rope-ins, we have the 4-H kiddos, we have the fairs, we have it all. And so to get that all back on track and push that forward, I'm real excited about that. That's good. So thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Minlow.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just a couple things. There has not been a formal organizational structure. As we said, we came to a point 5-6 years ago that there was never a charter created, and so we were looking at the organization of a combination of the community and the county and how we can best operate that. So if you have any thoughts, input that you want regarding the organization of how it's managed and that it is the direction we receive. I want to say that Jackie and I have been discussing this at length, but that I'm feeling we've talked about the economic development, broadband, that is something that is critical to the infrastructure of Gila County that we meet, and it takes people to do those things. In the same way, I have been looking at considering that we need to add somebody that, as we talked about broadband, a champion for our facilities and a champion for events and things that are we can assist in organizing. So plan to put into the budget for your consideration I'll include the broadband economic development positions and then also a rodeo fairgrounds type of position and dare I say event coordinator. And I believe I would put 2 positions in the budget for that, strictly because it's not just the fairgrounds, it's events county-wide that I think we need to pull in and look at and cooperate with the rodeo town, Payson, and the county we need to coordinate with all these activities and make sure that we've got our foot in the door of supporting Gila County in our recreation and events that happen here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and like I say, one of the first jobs I held here was working at the fairgrounds, and there was something going on all the time. And I would like I go out there now, and it's kind of a ghost town. There's not a lot happening, and there's guys that go out there every Sunday and fly their airplanes because it's a flat spot. We love to get something better for those guys because then people come out of Phoenix and Tucson to fly their airplanes. And as I go out there, I see a lot of different, people have come to me about dirt track racing, maybe that we're centrally located. I just like to look at some of the options to bring some life back to that facility because it is a great facility, and it's property that we have to use. And I think it's great that we put the animal shelter out there for an IGA with the DOC to help, take care of the animals. I think that was a great thing. But there's just a lot of land, a lot of facilities that are locked up. Gymkhanas and things like that with horses. There's 1 million horse stalls. Let's find something to use them or take the horse stalls down and build a dirt track where the horse stalls were. Whatever we could do to generate, and if Payson's going to be the rodeo town, and our area is not interested in rodeo anymore, well, what are we interested in? Let's get some people involved because we're 1.5 hours from Phoenix, 1.5 hours from Tucson, and people are dying for entertainment. We've got a facility that's just sitting there collecting cobwebs, and I'd like to have more input, more feed to, okay, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? The Fair and Racing Commission, God love them. They spent a lot of years creating a lot of atmosphere that created a lot of recreation for a lot of people. And that legacy's kind of going away. So we need to start another one. And that's why I'd like a work session on this and to get more familiar with not, what are we going to do to watch it fall down or what are we going to do to bring it back to life? That's just kind of where I'm at with it. Jackie?
And Mr. Chair, my apologies. I intended to say this at the beginning. Bill Byrne has been the chairman of the Fair and Racing Commission. He would have been here today, but he had appointments in the Valley. So I told him I would make sure I told you that, and that he's always also he is willing to visit individually with each of you, and he would have been here. He likely will make the next one.
Thank you very much. Mr. Minlow.
I just want to say that there's an interest in rodeos in Payson, but there's a lot of interest in rodeos and horse events and all of that down here as well.
Oh, I agree, but like I said, let's kindle some of them. Let's get a line going to bring some life back to that area. And Supervisor Klein, Kristen, you guys okay on stopping here for bringing up to another work session? Is there something you'd like them to bring to you at the next work session, maybe about the fairgrounds or something staff could work on for us?
No, I don't think so in specific, Mr. Chair. For me, I just look forward to those discussions, and I know we can come out with a good deal at the end, and especially if Mr. Burns is willing to be here and visit with us as well. So, or anybody else that's been involved with it, I look forward to all those discussions. So,
yeah, okay, thank you. All right, then I will adjourn today's. No, I won't. I got 2 more things. I get done. Okay. We got to go call to the public. Is there any public in Payson that would care to speak with us today?
No, sir.
I see none here in Globe. Do we have anyone on YouTube that would care to share anything with the Board of Supervisors today? Okay, then we will move on to regular agenda item 4. At any time during the meeting pursuant to ARS 38-431.02K, members of the Board of Supervisors and County Manager may present a brief summary of current events. No action may be taken on information presented. Mr. Christensen, or Supervisor Christian, do you have anything that you would care?
Thank you, Mr.
to share
Chairman.
with us
I'll only
today?
be 30 minutes. Real briefly, District 1 hosted the annual pre-fire season meeting. It was a great success. Everyone enjoyed it, participated greatly. Supervisor Klein joined me in that. Really happy to have him. And so it was my first introduction to that. And we talked about a lot of stuff, and it went really well, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Supervisor, thanks for inviting me. That was a good meeting, good turnout. So last Wednesday, I had my regular workforce meeting, WIOA. We did that. And then Thursday was the Northern Gila County preseason fire meeting, which was really good. Friday, March 26th, every Friday I'm on that CSA legislative conference call. Yeah, I'll say that, going through those bills every week is something to be a part of. It really is, and watching that process. So I'm glad to do it, and thank goodness for CSA helping with that. Saturday, March 27th, we did another cleanup out there at Irene's and Pinal Creek. A lot of stuff. There's tons of stuff left between me and Supervisor Humphrey, and it's just trashed up really bad. And so I'm sure in the future there'll be a lot more cleanups. Yesterday I was in Apache Junction. I attended a meeting down there. I wasn't really sure exactly what this meeting was going to entail. And as it turned out, there was a little group of people that I worked with and worked for years ago that was leading this charge, so they invited me to it. But basically, it was to talk about the superstition wilderness and where that needs to be directed as far as a wilderness, a monument, or how do we keep working with the millions of people that are moving into the Phoenix Valley, and it's only growing, and on and on. So it was just a real preliminary type meeting. They are going to put together a working group, and Tim, that's something I'd say if you're interested in, why, because it backs right up to your district. And if you want on there, you got it. I'll back you up if you want it. Just let me know. Good group of people. Everybody from Forest Service, BLM, individuals, the supervisors in Pinal County, ex-supervisors, ex-Forest Service people. A real knowledgeable group is going to be in that. So I was there yesterday. And then this Thursday, the county assessor's office is actually going to come to Young and bring about 5 of them up there. And what they're going to do is they're going to go through the admin site, the buildings that we're going to get under that lease from the Forest Service, and they're going to assess and put a price on those buildings, what they're worth. The process is once that's established and put down, then the special use or the lease is based on like a 3% of that value on those buildings, which would be offset by the fact that we would be in there taking care of the buildings, taking care of the septic systems, taking care of the water systems and all that. So it's basically a wash. So Thursday we're going to start that first step, and they're going to look at that and go through them all, and then get back with us, and then we're going to go on from there. That's it.
Well, thank you. Did you let them know they were going to bulldoze those buildings?
I
before
did.
You gathered it up so they wouldn't have been worth much.
I even let some people know that yesterday. So,
Well, good. I just thought I'd bring that up, and I'm proud of you for letting them know that that's what you think they're worth. I toured the animal shelter with Mr. O'Driscoll, the other day, it's amazing how all of that's coming together. And after working at the old animal shelter, it's amazing to see that come to be real life. It was a major necessity for Gila County and the animal owners of Gila County. Participated in an RTAC board meeting, attended the Lincoln Day luncheon, and I will hold a preseason fire meeting on April the 12th. Although I don't have much else they can burn, but we're going to have the meeting and see what won't burn. March 27th, I'm sorry I didn't come to help Supervisor Klein. I said I was going to, but the Republican Club asked me to be a guest speaker, so I did that instead. But yeah, that area is a bad area, and I need to do some cleanup work on my side of the creek out there in that area. So thank you very much, because that is a real beat up area, and I'm glad that you got with BLM, because we've had many discussions and toured it with BLM, and they were going to do a cleanup and never did. So anything we can do to help you with go forward on that, or discussions with them, we might not be able to do it together, but I'd like a piece of them too.
One thing, we need to work that out, because one thing we need to do, and thank you, Tim, is that I talked to the area manager yesterday in BLM, and so, but also standing beside me was the Globe Ranger and some other people. So he showed a big interest. I hope it was a true interest in our issues, and said that he would come up and take a look. But what I think, Tim, between me and you, because Steve doesn't really have any BLM up there, but we need a map that shows all the BLM area, district, their district or whatever, and need to start plotting on that map where a lot of these sites are at. So if and when they do show up, whether it's my district or Tim's district, it does not matter. It's all trash, and it's all BLM, that we can show this guy the issues and where it's at, and really kind of drill down hard on him to help us get them picked up.
We've got maps. We've got available maps, correct? Yes. Yeah, because I had maps when we toured of even the mines on those particular BLM lands.
So with those maps, Tom, maybe I can get a copy of them from you in the future, and between me and Tim, we can mark down those drainages that have the trash in them, where they're at, yada, 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 so we can set them on the table and say, here's where we're headed. This is your jurisdiction.
I came in and touched links, so I'm not sure of the specific subject.
Okay, public can't, the people can't hear you. So if you would step up to the mic, please.
My apologies, sirs.
That's okay, not a problem.
I came back into the conversation a hair late, but tell me what you're looking for and we can make maps.
BLM property.
Yep.
Yep, fairly easy to generate.
Yes, thank you.
That'd be really cool. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. So I think between the two districts, we do that, and hopefully BLM is serious about their help, and we can pull that together and get them to help us. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, and if that didn't kindle anything for anyone else, and it did, we got two directions.
I was just going to say,
Supervisor Christensen?
Perhaps Mr. Menlove has something. I was just going to remind you.
Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Minlove.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to give you an update on our COVID vaccinations in Gila County. So far, 32,658 doses have been administered. 20,087 people have received at least one shot, and 13,021 have been fully vaccinated. That means that as far as our older population, 65 and older, 73% of eligible adults 65 and older have been vaccinated, and that 56% of eligible non-tribal population have had at least one dose, and 36% of eligible non-tribal population are fully vaccinated. The reason the tribal is broken out in this is that they get their own vaccination allotment and go through them. So 73% of everyone 65 and older 56% of the population in Gila County have had at least one dose, and 36% of the population are fully vaccinated.
Thank you very much.
That, and just did want to, from the American Rescue Plan that was signed into law by President Biden on March 11th, 2021, that includes an allocation for local governments. That allocation to Gila County in total is approximately $10.5 million. The instructions on that legislation were that the first half of that money, about $5.25 million, be distributed to local governments within 60 days. So we will receive about $5.25 million on or before May 10th. So coming very quickly. And looking at the guidance and direction that we have, the first CARES package that came out is like every week they came out with new instructions, new guidance, and they a lot of times varied with that. Under President Biden, they're trying to get one set of instructions, one set of guidance out that we don't have to go, oh, well, we went down this way, but then we're going to take a step back and go this direction. They're trying to get all that together, so I'm not sure that we're going to get any guidance or direction on how that money can and will be used until hopefully by May 10th.
Will that be a work session?
We can certainly have a work session. I'd planned and talked to Patty Power about participating in a work session with the board, but we wanted to put it off until we get instructions, can get our feet underneath us and have a meaningful discussion on how it actually can be spent, because it comes down in the legislative bills, and there's comments made throughout, but it isn't necessarily the truth, or isn't necessarily the real story of how it can be spent. There's things that are left out and they go around in public. So I just want to let you know that there's that money coming too.
Well, thank you very much. And with that, Supervisor Klein.
One more thing I think you guys will find interesting is the Forest Service last year, we worked with them on a YCC crew. It was up there in Payson, and it's through the AmeriCorps. Well, this year they got crossways on their budgeting and their financing, and so the way they did their money, no one was able to come up with that grant money. And so I've been working with James, and it looks like we can help out on a YCC crew in Payson and in Globe this year. Globe is willing to take one right here locally, so that would be a big plus right here on this lower end. And that was one of my discussions with the new district ranger yesterday. So I'm looking forward to that. And hopefully next year they can kind of get it straight and get their finances going and be good from there on.
Well, thank you very much. And I will adjourn today's meeting, and thank you all very much for your information. And